What is VDI? As Google says, virtual desktop infrastructure. So essentially it's the converged meaning of having servers in a data center where you have dedicated virtual machines that are actually desktop machines, and that's delivered over the wire to endpoint devices, for example to PCs. These can be old PCs now, as long as they're capable of delivering video, tablet devices, smartphone devices, delivered either locally on site or remotely and across the cloud, of course.
Storage performance is critical. At the end of the day, it's about latency and performance that really contribute to the end user experience. So what you have to look at is utilizing high performance storage devices, 15K, 10K drives, traditionally now looking more at the use of solid state technology. And the solid state technology really is driving that cost per IOP much more favorably towards your traditional spinning drives. So the fact that what we see in a VDI environment is that we need high performance storage, and that's driven by the particular workload and the use cases. So when we look at multi-user simultaneously logging in to that environment, kind of all at the same time, updating profiles, booting their systems, what we actually find, or what we've seen, is that 90% of that workload is write I/O. So when you're doing write I/O, it's a lot more strenuous on your storage devices than if you're doing typically read I/O. So straight away we need high performance, quite expensive storage. And then also when you're deploying the storage along with your VDI, with your virtual desktops, there's not typically that tie-in. So it's quite difficult to deploy and then monitor and report and manage the actual physical infrastructure back to what that end user experience is. So really, we're trying to manage the cost, we're trying to manage the end user experience, and we're trying to make sure over a longer period that the end user experience is maintained as more people come onto that platform.
Okay, so underpinning that technology is obviously Supermicro hardware, an x86 commodity vendor. So just to recap on that, so Supermicro hardware, an x86 commodity vendor. We essentially have the Glue NX Store series. This is actually produced from our headquarters in St Albans, Hertfordshire, using Supermicro technology. We have 2 head nodes and JBOD for scale-out architectures, allowing you to scale into petabytes if needed, bringing a unified NAS and SAN, supporting fiber channel and iSCSI protocols, NFS and file transfer protocol, a simple web GUI from Nexenta, of course, to be able, with also a CLI and SSH access for that advanced management need. With an enterprise level feature set from the ZFS file system, which I won't go into too much detail on because there's a very big, long and drawn out presentation on that, I can assure you. There's a high availability cluster for that as well, so you can have that data resiliency without the requirement to actually have multiple storage centers, right? So having more than one pool of storage to support additional storage nodes. We'll also then have high performance through integrated ZFS, SSD and DRAM caching for those reads and writes that Neil was talking about earlier. So with that powering the back end of your storage infrastructure for virtual desktop, we now have exciting technologies coming through from NVIDIA with virtual GPU. So traditionally, the graphics are actually rendered by CPUs in traditional VDI environments. So what we now have is we actually have the ability to install NVIDIA GPUs within those server form factor, and then actually split those GPUs up and share those out via the hypervisor to those virtual desktops, giving a much richer graphics experience. We also have a demonstration of that on our stand if you'd like to visit along a bit later on. Example of one of those servers here. So it's a 1U form factor system with 2 grid cards inside, actually supporting either 2, 4, 8, 16 and up to 64 users. We also then have, of course, the Citrix or VMware environment installed into that. Nexenta Connect installed also, which reduces the latency and increases the bandwidth available to those systems, so those particular virtual desktops do actually perform and actually give that rich experience that you need. We also then, of course, include our 3 years on-site next business day and support packages with that, and on-site installation and further guidance if needed. I'll now hand over to Neil, who'll go on a bit more about Nexenta Connect and the benefits of that.
So really, I've spoken about how the to drive down the cost per desktop for storage, we're basically using hardware and a software combination. So what we see in the graphic here is that the front-end servers, this is where we actually install the Nexenta Connect software. And that's essentially what we call a virtual storage appliance. So that actually sits on top of the hypervisor, and they provide storage services to the virtual desktops that sit, on that server as well. So that's actually providing the storage to provision your virtual desktops, your images. So we hold the images there and we serve them out, and they're running off essentially what's an accelerated storage platform. And I say accelerated, so how do we accelerate that? So we're essentially utilizing SSD storage, so given, that's the technology, the hardware technology that gives the best cost per IOP, and really that's what we're all about in the VDI environment. It's about performance. But to also squeeze all those images and those that data onto what's a relatively low capacity area, we are making use of deduplication and compression technology in the software. We also make use of the actual RAM in the server as well to accelerate, the reads and writes. So using the combination of extremely fast, low latency technology, we can deliver very good performance, but also reduce the capacity footprint as well. But when we're talking about VDI, we also need to talk about not just the desktop images, but also the data as well, the user data. So the user profiles, the actual data that you store, your Word documents, your Office documents. So we do need kind of a mass storage area as well. So what we do, we do work with multiple back-end storage arrays. So it might be an array that you already have, or it might be something that you're looking at to purchase as well. But essentially we're agnostic to what that back-end array is, and I'll talk about a couple of use cases in a second. But essentially we're offloading the VDI workload from the back-end storage array, whether it's a SAN or a NAS. Ultimately, you don't have to then go and put in all of your expensive drives in the actual storage array. You can leverage the devices in the server itself. Typically you'd see two types of deployment of VDI. So we've got this example here, stateless or floating, or non-persistent is another terminology. And this is where, we're not so concerned about having maximum uptime. If we lose a server, what the end user will experience is essentially a reboot. So it's kind of like a hard drive failing in a laptop or a desktop on their desk. If that fails, reboot. Once the drive's been replaced, of course, we just reboot. A little bit better in the data center, of course, because we're going to have a cluster. So automatically everything will fail over, and the server will and the desktop will kind of reboot pretty rapidly. But we do have that reboot experience. So that scenario for us here is that we would actually run the software on the servers themselves, utilizing the storage in the server, and maybe only utilizing the centralized storage array for your user data and your user profiles. That back-end store can be Nexenta software sitting on Supermicro hardware, or it could be any other storage array that's on the market. So we're kind of happy to work in both types of environments. The other deployment is your persistent desktop, where you want to not have that reboot. You want to tolerate any server failure. At that point, we would move to a shared storage array to actually host the desktop images as well as the user data. So if the server does fail, another server already has access to the image that's on there. It's live, it's running, and we just have a seamless transition. So obviously we're starting to think about, there's a little bit more cost coming into the environment. We may be looking at graphics workers or executive workers. We don't want the CEO to suffer his PC rebooting. We want to try and give the best end user experience to him always. So there's different deployment areas, and it depends on very much the type of organization you work with, the services that you're trying to deliver. But we've essentially got an answer to both areas with the same software set and actually very similar hardware set as well. The other piece I mentioned earlier was the management of the storage and the VDI images together. So when we're deploying storage, we want to add more virtual desktops, more users are coming into the environment. What we've actually done is integrate the provisioning of virtual desktops so that we're including both the Citrix and the VMware tools and actually our storage provisioning as well. Now, and then maintaining the right end user experience moving forward, it's all about monitoring performance, capacity, availability. So we've got the tools in place to help deploy and to manage and also to monitor. So this quite funky graph down here, this actually gives you a view at the desktop level, at the user level, to show you what IOPS latency, throughput and capacity capability he has. So we can monitor that and we can make sure that he's getting the right experience that he's going to be requesting from the IT services department.